I recently watched the Terrifier movies, and I was appalled to say the least. I often go into movies empty-minded, and by that I mean with no initial expectations or background info on the film, and that was my premise going into the first two films, because I haven't watched the third. But for the first one, I was really into the low budget 2010s Tumblr reminiscence kind of vibe. I thought it was a trashy film, but in a good way, to where it's aware that it's bad. It's not exactly rooted in completely in reality, and it's very over the top, and it had bad lines. It had stupid characters. I think it works in a good way that, considering the low budget and what the actors were given, they gave a great performance with the outline that they had to follow. I think that Art was a very distinct character, and I see why people like him. I will say, I think the films are way heavier in strength together. Standalone, maybe not so much, as then you'll lose a lot of the basis information from the first film or the better SFX in the other films. They also have other higher budgets than the other ones. Just the whole ordeal makes them a lot stronger together. I think the Art is a way better character than in the first film. I think you get a lot more personality out of him. Not saying though that he didn't have any iconic moments in the first film. Now, this was my standalone opinion before seeing the other reviews. I was kind of baffled that I didn't think about that and that it didn't cross my mind how terrible that it can be viewed. But I do understand where it's coming from. It raised a lot of questions for me, like, is it okay for horror to be comedic? So I will be taking these reviews that I will be quoting in a moment here from corners of the internets, but I'm going to leave their names for anonymous for privacy reasons. This flick is a gore fest with none of that slasher charm. The reason for this statement was due to the fact that the film is entirely brutal and they didn't leave much time to connect with the character before. So I agree with this review in some ways. I do think that women are entirely targeted in these films, but not as much as people might make it out to be. With the math that I did on the death counts, it's pretty even. I think that the women's deaths are just way more in depth and we get full-fledged scenes from them, whereas the guys are kind of just quick little sections to build up tension in between. I do think that more often women are sexualized in these films rather than the men, but there is that one scene, if you know what I'm talking about. Now, to the underage statement that they make, I do think that it's crazy to think that these characters are meant to be underage individuals, so there's no defending it in that context of the film, but the actors are all nearing 30 pretty much during filming, so it kind of is reminiscent of like older films where 30-year-olds would be playing teenagers. Again, kind of nostalgic in that fact. I do, however, think that they did a good job setting the scenery to look realistic, because I think although it looked of course more ideal and more perfectionalized and idolized for the camera, I do like how at times it feels very lived in and their styles felt very real to me. And like they're people that I could genuinely have gone to school with or seen in person, which I think that's something that makes me a little distant from a lot of films nowadays. I don't think that it's underage. I think that it's just so extremely gory and so unreal it is impossible to happen. And it's kind of weird that they decided to set each character to be underage for a film like this. Claim number 2. I don't know how anyone can find these themes to be comical. They're insufferable. So this is someone wondering how a murder horror film can be seen as anything but terrifying and depressing. So these statements made me rethink a lot of the films. They made me wake up and realize the different sides of how horror can be viewed rather than just my own that's kind of been desensitized over the years. It's something that I never realized before. My mindset was never rooted in the reality or too much of the influence that it would portray, but rather in the art of it and how these scenes were created by the team behind it. Films are extremely produced, and I've heard a lot of people say that they don't find films scary because they know that they're fake. The actors' place in it and the role they play, the special effects, the practical or computer, and imagining what it really is. So I do think that horror can be comedic for some people. Humor is of course ambivalent, and everyone has their own opinion, but many may find these films humorous because they see beyond what's two-dimensional and they realize how extreme these scenarios are to the point that they're incapable of being real life. A human's bare hands ripping of someone's arm off, bleaching the girl and then rubbing salt all over her wounds. She's literally a corpse by the end of it and somehow is still moving alive. It's supposed to be completely camp in a way that someone who's seen so many different kinds of horror to the point that they're desensitized to gore and that it can be laugh-worthy. Now, I was completely in shock and I didn't realize how absolutely brutal and sad that scene was until the following day. The movies are a lot to process and I was just bewildered. Now, this next one, I only seen part of while in a tattoo shop, and I finished it till the end. I just remember thinking that it was so silly, and that it was clearly an older film, but I just love how terrible the SFX has aged. I think that it's beautiful in that, to be honest. I kind of adore older cinematography, especially foreign films, that of Valerie and Her Week of Wonders, Death in Venice, and then also some American films like The Shining, and older Alice in Wonderland adaptations. This film gave me some of that nostalgic feeling, and that it's something so absurdly silly that I would have watched as a kid and then been genuinely terrified. So I sat there wondering what film it was, and my family also thought the same thing. So after just a few basic plot searches, I was in fact able to find which film that it was, which fuels my next take. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So, this person said, it's definitely a cult classic, and it's original in its humor and overall storyline. Memorable death, creatively corny, but in the best way possible. It is scary if you remove the fun out of it. I think that maybe this film is a good early example, because it at the time was going against what the basic mold for a successful movie at the time, which in turn makes it so iconic today because it's a standout film of that era. It reminds me of how in order to really make your own mark and become the blueprint, you have to be the very first one to do it, or at least be the very first big successful version before people begin to replicate your success. A better example might be Avril Lavigne, who inspired Hilary Duff, Ashley Simpson, and many other music, as well as Ember Chamberlain, who paved the way for this lifestyle, relatable, authentic, kind of quirky, and like this this emphasis on coffee, which I think that it's kind of this influencer craze that she's kind of paved the way for. Now, back to Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I think that the film can have some unnerving moments in a more uncanny way, but that it was so wacky, unnatural, and unreal that some moments can be completely the furthest thing distant from real life, and that it can be humorous. We tend to notice that each decade the films tend to be the biggest scare of that era, things that can happen to a person in real life. And this film is completely almost the furthest thing from that, and it stands out because of that. So it's funny in comparison to a simple plot like Halloween of this era as well, as opposed to a slightly more rooted in reality film that was popular at the same time, such as The Night Stalker. So, back to Terrifier. I personally didn't think that the characters were too over-sexualized, except for maybe the standard stupid blonde girl in the first one. I think that was what was good about her character, is that she was a stereotype, because they knew that they couldn't deepen her character enough, and so she was kind of a familiar feeling girl, and it filled in the blanks for us. And I think that was a good decision, and I think that it made her death and her character overall more memorable, even though she didn't get much screen time prior to her death. They kind of made her one thing and stuck to it till the very end. Now, when it comes to Sienna's costume being seen as raunchy, I think that that is okay, because we get the standard mom pep talk and her saying, every girl wears this my age, and I think that it's super common, universal kind of experience, and I even see my friends have this kind of talk with their parents. So I think that it was fine. I thought it was also backed by the fact that it was her dad's drawing, and it was a passion project for her. Anyways, those are my final thoughts for now. Comment below your own opinions or other notable films that are similar to this. Other examples I think could be mentioned are movies like Jeepers Creepers or The Human Centipede. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to comment, like, and subscribe for more videos like this. And I also have music that you can listen to. You are hearing it as you listen. That would be at Zyroom on all platforms, as well as linked down below or on the channel. I'm working on so much music, actually. I'm finally finishing up some things, and I have a song coming out called Hybrid Apparatus. It will be out December 5th, and you are listening to it now. Anyways, I'll see you all next time. Goodbye. I appreciate all of your support and love recently, and I'll see you all next time. Bye. I didn't spend all